Yeah.
We're live.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. We'll give folks another minute or two here to get signed on. In the meantime, if you don't mind, if you could put your name and affiliation into the chat if you're one of our committee members.
All right, well, thanks everyone for joining today. I'll go ahead and just kind of start out with some introductions to the Odo team here, and then Ken will kick us off with the presentation itself. But yeah, thanks for joining and a continuation of our Tier 2 Advisory Committee. I know we've met a couple times so far. This group was really instrumental in helping us through our rulemaking process in 2024 to finish our rulemaking for adoption of the Oregon Building Performance Standard. And then we've met a couple times in 2025 also just to continue discussing what the BPS means for Tier 2 buildings, all kind of toward that long-term goal of making a recommendation in 2030 for a building performance standard, potentially for Tier 2 buildings and what that might mean. So this is just an opportunity to kind of continue that discussion, but before we kick off, I'll just introduce myself and the rest of the team and turn it over to them to introduce. But I'm Blake Shalide. I manage the Codes and Standards section here at the Oregon Department of Energy. And I'll turn it over to Ken to introduce himself.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ken Davies. I'm a program analyst with the Codes and Standards team.
Thanks, Ken. Madeline.
Hi, Madeline McGuire. I'm a program analyst as well with the Codes and Standards team.
Thanks, Madeline. Josh.
Hi, I just joined the Codes and Standards team. I will be the incentive analysis for the Berry program.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. And some folks on the call might recognize Josh as a friendly face from the Oregon Energy Strategy work, if anybody was involved with the OSIS project. Josh is new to our Codes and Standards team, but not new to Odo. So we're glad to have him on the team here and be able to leverage his expertise. Next, Andrew.
Hey everyone, Andrew Johnson, also a program analyst with the Codes and Standards team, primarily managing the incentive programs.
Thanks, Andrew. And Judy.
Hi everyone, I'm Judy and I am the program assistant.
Thanks, Judy. We also have another member of the team, Lisa Gartland, who I don't see on screen. I don't know if Lisa is here or not. So some folks might have encountered Lisa, but Lisa's our facilities engineer on the team, handling a lot of the technical components of the BPS program. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ken.
Thanks, Blake. Yeah, welcome everyone. This is the second one of these Tier 2 Advisory Committee meetings we've had. First one was back in June. Until further notice, I think we'll be doing this on a semi-annual basis. Just a reminder of who Odo is and our mission and what we do. So today we'll be going over a few things, just a reminder of what the HB 3409 requirements are, and then we'll have some discussion in terms of recent developments, revisions to the rule, an incentives update, and long-term data aggregation with utilities, and then any anticipated barriers and and some available ODO funding. So taking it back to HB 3409, the directive was that by October 1st of 2030, we shall submit a report to the governor and an interim committee of the Legislative Assembly that recommends performance standards for Tier 2 buildings, which there are not right now, it's just benchmarking, and includes estimates of costs to eligible building owners and challenges that they might face in implementing a performance standard for those buildings. So that's kind of where we're here. We had to get that process started also within the legislation by July of last year, so that we had that first meeting, and now we're continuing down that road. Just a reminder on the overall timeline, you can see where we are here at the beginning of 2026. Still another pretty much 4.5 or 3.5 years to go to get to that October 1st, 2030 deadline. Where the covered buildings are in the state, you can see them highlighted in gold there, and noting that approximately 75% of those buildings that are covered are Tier 2 buildings. You probably are familiar with this graphic. It's been updated since we last met in terms of the development of a special Tier 2 category. The size thresholds are the same as they were before, but the special Tier 2 encompasses buildings that weren't clearly defined before. And we'll get into some more detail on that. So a summary of the updates. Staff, as we began to implement the rule, came across some areas that were less than clear, and we wanted to add some clarity to those and more definition where needed. We, as I started to say on the last slide, we defined special Tier 2 buildings. So we added prisons, barracks, residential care, senior care to special Tier 2. The building tier determination needed some clearing up, so we more explicitly set out those Tier 1 and Tier 2 requirements. Talked about mixed use tier determination in terms of at least 50% of a building's gross floor area threshold, tipping it one way or another for Tier 2 or Tier 1. Group buildings, allowing for a group application for non-shared metering situations, and extending Tier 2 status to groups with special Tier 2 buildings within the mix, as long as they have a common purpose. And then exemptions. Exemptions weren't really called out for Tier 2 buildings, and we wanted to allow the same exemptions for Tier 1 and Tier 2. Didn't really see a reason why we should deny Tier 2 buildings the same exemptions. So the standard language references Tier 1, where it did that before. It will now say Tier 1 or Tier 2, and those sections listed there will be amended or have been already. Updated multifamily. We initially had condos covered by the program that looked to be problematic in the sense that they are individually owned units where they're owner occupied in a lot of cases. And typically a condo unit is not going to meet the size threshold required to be covered by the BPS. So the definition was changed in terms of multifamily housing, primarily with the phrase you see there underlined in red, where somebody's paying rent to a building owner. So MFDs are still in, multifamily still in there, condos not. Yeah, Washington doesn't cover those either. So we will still cover common areas in condo buildings, but we don't imagine that any of those will aggregate over 35,000 square feet. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew to talk about incentives.
Thank you, Ken. So this will be review for many of you. We have been developing and working on the Early Compliance Incentive Program for some time now. We're calling it the Early Compliance Action and Planning Program, ECAP. We have $2 million in incentives to offer for the program. Tier 1 and Tier 2 buildings are eligible. Tier 1 buildings must be 15 EOI units over the target that is in statute. And there are a few compliance actions that you can apply for. The compliance actions need to be completed 1 year before the actual compliance date. And the compliance actions are benchmarking and reporting for 35 cents per square foot, energy management plan and operations and maintenance program for 5 cents per square foot, energy audit for 35 cents per square foot, and achieving compliance for 10 cents per square foot for a total of 85 cents per square foot. Considering the limited funding, we do have incentive caps, $50,000 for Tier 1 buildings over 200,000 square feet, $35,000 for Tier 1 buildings 35,000 to 200,000 square feet, and $10,000 for all Tier 2 buildings. Next slide, thank you. So we just completed round 1 of the Early Compliance Action and Planning Program, ECAP. The opportunity closed on December 19th. We have two rounds, each $1 million. In the first round, we received 81 total applications, 27 Tier 1 applications requesting about $1 million, and 54 Tier 2 applications requesting just over $500,000. It is a competitive review process. You can see here we anticipated there would be more incentives requested than funding available, so that's why we have a competitive review process. We are currently reviewing all the applications, scoring them, and the highest scoring applications will be awarded an incentive. We plan to notify the awardees by the end of January, and we expect the round 2 opportunity to open this spring. You can see on the right here, if you would like more information about the program, the ECAP program, you can go to the BPS webpage, Oregon BPS Incentive Opportunities, and the administrative rule link is on the upper right-hand corner. You can also find more information about ECAP on that Incentive Opportunities webpage. And we have an additional incentive funding program coming in 2026. That's the $12 million in federal funding for energy efficiency measures from the CERTA grant. And the opportunity announcement and application and all of the other program materials will be available soon. And,
Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah.
Next up is Madeline talking about data aggregation.
Hi all, I'm just going to pop in here quick for a refresher on data aggregation for our BPS program. The utilities that are considered qualified utilities are listed on your screen on the left. They're PGE, Pacific Power, eWeb Avista, our two natural gases, Cascade and Northwest Natural. Avista is also natural gas. So these particular utilities have a requirement for data aggregation for buildings that have multiple tenants. On the left-hand side of your screen, you'll see again what those prerequisites are for the data aggregation. Although these 6 utilities are required for data aggregation for multiple tenants, we know that many owners are going to turn to their utility for data aggregation and help. So we are encouraging building owners to work with not only their tenants, but their utilities to obtain a whole building energy data. The reason for this is the utility information can be used to determine the building's EUI, whether that's from monthly utility bills, fuel delivery invoices, sub-metering or flow meters. So just a reminder of where our data aggregation is for BPS and when it is applicable.
Thanks, Madeline. And then finally, in terms of going forward, obviously we're still in the very early phases of gathering data. Once we have that, we can do the data analysis to help us identify obstacles and paths forward for Tier 2 buildings. And as a reminder, ODO does have funding to support additional studies once those barriers have been identified. Want to throw it out to the group again. If you have any feedback at this point in terms of the anticipated barriers, and then we'll also get to any questions in the chat. And I will stop sharing. Starting from the bottom up, not hearing anything in terms of the barrier stuff yet, but we can get to that certainly. Looks like this is for Andrew. Any general summary of the projects you're seeing in terms of the incentive applications?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I'm guessing you're referring to energy efficiency measures or projects, which would be supported by the upcoming federal program, the $12 million. So we don't know yet. In terms of ECAP, that's meant to support planning activities. And so in terms of the compliance actions that folks applied for, it was mostly energy benchmarking and reporting, especially for Tier 2, which makes sense. And then for Tier 1, it was mostly benchmarking, reporting, and energy audits. But for the federal program, the CERTA program that we're calling BERI, the Building Energy Reduction Incentive, we will open that program soon, and we'll have a good idea what kind of projects building owners are applying for in the spring sometime. So we can update you. We'll have an update for you next time around, I think.
Okay, looks like we have you want to handle that, Blake? Question from
yeah, I see there's a question for from Jeff Glass, and I think if there's any comments from the committee members, we'll kind of prioritize those first if there's any questions, and then I see Jeff, you kind of raised your hand and then put it in the chat, which is great. Then we can kind of move to if there's any questions or clarifications that come in from general members of the public too. But Jeff is asking, as for barriers, the sample calculation for EUIT and the BPS 003 guidance, which calculates a weighted EUI, will be a huge barrier for hospitals to break out energy use by different building activities. So we have, Jeff, if you haven't seen it, we have developed an EUIT target tool that is an Excel-based tool that will hopefully make it a little bit easier for folks to calculate those weighted average EITs, where you can enter in the appropriate square footage and building types for an individual building to come up with the weighted average for a target for a building. So hopefully that's one tool that could be used to reduce the burden a little bit for you. We are going to be putting forward an informational instructional video. That's one of the first ones on our list for this year. So kind of keep an eye out for that, for how to use that EUI target tool. But if there's anything else anyone else on the team wanted to add to that, but yeah, thanks for the comment about that. Yeah, if there's no other questions, I think from our advisory committee right now, I think Jeff can be unmuted if he has a follow-up.
I do have a question. I'm a committee member.
Yeah, go ahead, Ben. Yeah.
Okay. So I saw that there was 54 tier 2 applications, and I had been in touch with a multifamily affordable housing provider that has a fairly large portfolio, and they were not able to get data from the utilities. I think the utilities response is data is not available to aggregate until January 1st. And then to apply, they had to have an EUI already, but they weren't able to get their tenant data before the round one deadline. So I'm curious if they're how could 54 tier 2 applications apply if the utility, or were they just in situations where they had utilities that would provide the data ahead of the agreement with the state?
Yeah, I think I can take that one, Blake. Great question. So tier 2 applications were not required to submit their EUI. And so if it's a multifamily tier 2 application, it should be very straightforward. I think most of the applicants, at least the feedback we're getting from them, the application was pretty simple. And so it's essentially just building owner information and building information to submit that. For tier 1 applications, it's more involved, and I think you might be thinking about the tier 1 application process because we have that requirement in statute that a building needs to be 15 units over the target. So we had to confirm their EUI and EUIT to make sure they were eligible or not.
That makes sense. I think that the experience is that an EUI was required when they applied.
Okay.
So I haven't actually gone through the application form, but if that's the
Mhm.
case, I think that's worth clarifying for the next round. And I don't understand, is the next round 2 sometime this spring, but there is a $12 million separate round that's coming sooner. And is that a tier 2 eligibility too that I can refer them to for that opportunity announcement? Is it through the same process too, or is that a separate sign up to learn about it?
Slightly different program and slightly different process. The ECAP program, the $2 million is state funded, and the $12 million is federal funding. And so there are slightly different requirements, but both tier 1 and tier 2 buildings will be eligible. And for the federal funded program, we're calling BERI, the Building Energy Reduction Incentive. The buildings just need to have an EUI that's higher than their target to be eligible. They don't necessarily have to have a building that's 15 units over their target. So the threshold to be eligible is a little lower, but each tier 1 and tier 2 applications will both require EUI calculation.
Okay, so the
Just so
tier
that-
2 would require an EUI higher than an EUIT to
Yes.
qualify for that
both.
round,
Mm-hmm.
even though that would only provide benchmarking. Is that right? Incentive, or is there
Well,
an
the
incentive
federal
beyond
funded,
benchmarking?
yeah, sorry to interrupt you there, but the second program, the federally funded program, is only for energy efficiency measures.
I see.
Yeah, so we did that intentionally. The feedback we got from you all actually was that the funding would be better spent on the front end on planning activities, and so we decided to require energy efficiency measures for the second part of the program, which kind of made sense.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I think Adam, I think you're next with the hand raise.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the question on the federal funding. If I recall from the previous presentations that was specifically for decarbonization efforts. Is that correct?
Yes, that's the goal of the program is emissions reduction. And so as part of the program, we will require an energy audit to be submitted with the application. and with estimated carbon reductions for each energy efficiency measure. And so once we release the opportunity announcement and the application instructions, that will be very clear. But yeah, the energy audit is a big part of that, and the ultimate goal for the program is emissions reductions.
Okay. And with the federal funding, is there any anticipated additional reporting or like payroll kind of reports that would be above and beyond what's required by the state projects?
No. The only reporting required will be once the project is completed, you'll need to submit invoices and evidence that the project, the energy efficiency measures have been installed and completed. We will have our own internal reporting with DEQ, Oregon DEQ and EPA on the actual carbon emissions reductions for each project.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the questions so far. I'm not seeing any other hands raised from our advisory committee members right now.
We just had a couple of potential barriers noted there in the chat, Blake, and I've made a note of those so we can take a look at those.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for
I don't
that.
think we're going to answer right now, but yeah.
I did see, now looking at the chat, I see a question from Michael Arndt about sharing Boston's approach to condos with Lisa Gartland last fall. Was this information reviewed and considered? I know that Lisa did consider your comments in our updates that we made. So maybe now, without any other questions coming in from the advisory committee members, I think Jeff rather, had a question earlier, and maybe he wanted to unmute himself. Or actually, I think we need to unmute him if he wanted to follow up with his earlier question. So
I can
maybe
unmute. I'll unmute Jeff.
Josh, if you could unmute Jeff Glass, that would be great.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me now?
We can.
Great. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to clarify the comment. These things get pretty complicated quickly, and putting this in a chat note didn't do it justice. So I think I'm referring to the same guidance document that you mentioned that showed a EUIT calculation for a hospital and included 4 or 5 different occupancy group or building occupancy types. And this is, I'm not concerned about the ability to create an EUIT. I'm concerned about an ability for hospitals to report the information that will align with the way that EUIT is going to be calculated. So when in the compliance, a hospital will be required to tell you what the EUI is for that hospital when that time comes. By the way that EUIT is calculated, my interpretation is we would have to then be able to back out the energy for those different categories of space. Cafeterias, clinics, even central plants, laboratories. There's all kinds of different occupancy types that make up a hospital. Hospitals are not set up at all to be able to collect that information. And I mean, I'm working with 2 of the larger hospital systems in the state. There's not a building that's submetered that way. I'm quite familiar with most of them. So my worry and the barrier that I'm trying to articulate for you has to do with the ability to report data in a way that is going to be meaningful for you to establish an EUI target for an occupancy like a hospital. It may actually relate to other type 2 buildings, maybe prisons or something like that, that might have a cafeteria. I don't know about prisons, but I can speak to hospitals. So though I understand the logic behind the weighted EUIT, I worry that hospitals will not be able, without huge amount of expense, and even then I think it's going to be extraordinarily difficult to try to calculate how much energy is going into a section of the building that was never intended for that purpose. So that's my concern about a barrier, is actually giving you reporting meaningful data come time to do that. So I've been in conversations with the 2 hospital systems that I work with. They are excited about the opportunity and happy to participate in a subgroup if you'd like. I know Sky, he knows me, and I suspect he probably would be willing to as well. I think that if you'd like, sooner than later, it would be a good opportunity for us to get together and really talk about that, because we need to have as much planning time as we can to know a rule and how we're going to be able to implement that. So I was just sort of trying to anticipate down the line when we have this compliance requirement for those types of tier 2 buildings. That helps to clarify.
Yeah, understood. Thanks for that clarification. That's really helpful. And thanks for the offer for like a separate meeting. We may just take you up on that in the future.
Wonderful. Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah. I don't see any other hands raised or any other questions coming in. There is a question that just came in. It looks like it's for you, Andrew. I'll go ahead and read it out loud. An incentive question. Are building owners encouraged to reapply for round 2 incentives if their buildings are not approved in round 1? Or does denial of funding in round 1 mean that they are not likely to get approved in round 2?
Yeah, I would encourage you to reapply if you're not awarded an incentive. The limit is 2 applications per building owner. And so you just never know what the response is going to be. So and I think the time required to complete a tier 2 application is not too high. So I would certainly throw your hat in the ring if you're still interested in funding.
Sorry, could you clarify that again? I wasn't aware of the 2 applications per building owner. So does that mean a building owner with 1 building could file 2 applications for the same building? And does that also mean that a building owner with 20 buildings can only file 2 applications for 2 buildings?
Yeah, so it would be, sorry, I might have misspoke. It's 2 applications per building owner, and the applications need to be for separate buildings. So if a building owner has 5 buildings, they can only submit 2 applications for 2 individual buildings.
Thanks. Is that the case for round 2 as well? And will that be the case for the EPA funding, the CERTA money?
Yes, that will be the case for round 2 of ECAP, the state-funded program, and for the federally funded program. I do believe that requirement will be the same, just because we have limited funding for so many eligible buildings.
Since we're on incentives, there's one more for you there, Andrew, in terms of scoring criteria, I think.
Yeah, good question. We prioritized certain things, and you can find the competitive evaluation criteria in the opportunity announcement on our website.
And then I think we had one other hand up.
Yeah, I see. Looks like Michael and then Adam. So we'll go with Michael first.
Thanks, Mike. For the for the first round, can those applicants that are not approved just be automatically put into the round 2 versus having to reapply?
Yeah, no, we're going to require that if you're still interested, if you weren't awarded an incentive and you're still interested, you'll need to resubmit for tier 2 applications, tier 1 applications as well. So again, the applications for tier 2 are really not that time consuming. I know that folks were filling them out within 15 minutes, just because it's pretty basic building owner and building information. It's definitely not as rigorous as the tier 1 application that requires benchmarking and reporting to see if they're eligible or not.
Okay, I see a few hands raised now, which is good. Adam, and then there's Ben, and then Vin. So Adam.
All right, it's more of a technical question, thinking about Energy Star and pushing submit. Is Odo going to also require this kind of the same standard ID? Because I remember submitting to the city of Portland that we had 1 or 2 buildings that didn't have the unique building identifier set as the standard ID. It was set as like a custom ID, and it didn't get pushed into the right cell, so they weren't able to identify the buildings. And I guess I'm bringing this up to if both the city and Odo are using that same standard ID field, would I then, I guess I'm assuming I would have to make kind of 2 copies of all of my buildings, 1 to push to Odo and 1 to push to City of Portland.
Yeah, I think that's probably too technical to dive into today, but I'd love to have that conversation. I think I think we've kind of discussed a little bit of that before, internally at least, and our intention is not to have 2 separate instances of buildings for different reporting purposes. So we'd like to align those, but yeah, let's continue that discussion.
Yeah, Energy Star won't allow you to do that either.
Okay, thanks. Ben, I think you're next with the hand raised.
Yeah, thanks, Blake. I'm trying to unmute myself.
Yep.
I wanted to revisit Jeff's concern, actually, and just make sure I understood. Because it sounded to me like the concern was that, in addition to pulling the EUI target, by a weighted average of building use, that you are also required to report that way, which is not my understanding. My understanding is that you're reporting the EUI for a whole building or even a group of buildings. So I just wanted to back up to that and make sure that's clear.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ben. And that's right. Yeah, when you're reporting your EUI, it's based on your whole building, or if everything is metered separately and you're applying as a grouped building, it's based on that grouped building. And you're not required to report your EUI based on individual sections of your building that aren't metered differently or metered separately.
Yeah, and Jeff, does that kind of alleviate the concern you had there and that barrier? Did I understand that correctly?
Oh, Jeff is muted. Yeah. Maybe we can unmute Jeff.
And that, what you say, Ben, I appreciate that. My understanding of the legislation is that ultimately the reporting will help inform the final EUIT for these different building occupancy groups. And therefore it's very, very important to get the alignment between what we report and what we use as a target. And what you describe we report is a whole hospital. Every hospital includes a cafeteria, many of them include clinics, which are integral with the hospital. Almost all of them have laboratories. Those different kinds of occupancy groups are naturally or considered part of a hospital. So, so it's, the weighted average could work if we took those different occupancies out of our reporting in a hospital. But we think of a hospital as including all those different groups that make up a total hospital EUIT. Every hospital typically has those types of categories of uses. And the excluded use of the physical plant is a big use that just because there isn't a category of a physical plant, that's because the physical plant is considered part of the hospital. And that's the way that the law is set up in Washington. And it seems as if through this weighted EUI target, which I understand the logic of, I just think then that we were going to have to provide you data that aligns with that. And that's my point. So if we gave you data that included all those other occupancy groups, it wouldn't be an accurate measure to allow for determination of a EUIT for that particular hospital occupancy if it wasn't the entire hospital. If you understand what I'm talking about, is that clear? Or maybe it would be worth having a separate offline conversation.
I think I am grasping the concern in your comments, but I also think a separate offline conversation would be really helpful to help us understand the unique scenarios that hospitals, and I think this probably applies to other building types too, other potential tier 2 building types. But if I understand the concern or the comments, it's all kind of geared towards the eventual potential recommendation for a building performance standard for hospitals, and making sure that we get that EUI right, that it properly accounts for the different use types within a hospital, whether we're just draw a boundary across the whole building, or looking at the individual uses and different different space types throughout the hospital to make sure that we're getting that EUI target correct, because every hospital is a little bit different.
Exactly. I think you understand the concern, and it certainly can be done either way. It just would be a huge barrier for a hospital to determine what those separate uses are and then back those out in our reporting of what would then be called a hospital without these other types of uses.
Yeah, and I think these are really good questions and really good points. And I think this is exactly the reason why buildings like hospitals are included as tier 2 for now, and that we have some time to gather this data and figure out what I said for now. I mean, they're tier 2, but we have some time to gather this data in order to make a recommendation for a potential building performance standard for tier 2 buildings, just due to their complex nature. So I think these are kind of the exact, if I had to guess, this was the exact conversations that the legislature intended us to be having as we work toward this eventual potential recommendation in a few years. So,
and of course, providing as clear guidance as soon as possible is in everybody's interest. So totally agree. Yeah. Thank you.
I think, let's see, as for questions, Ben, you've been waiting patiently with a hand up.
Hey, thanks. I do have a question, but I wanted to maybe address some of the other questions too that have come in since I raised my hand. The first one, just thinking through what you mentioned. So for those who don't know, Ben Mason, City of Portland, I oversee the city's energy reporting program that's been effective since calendar year 2015 for annual reporting to the city. And we have been working very closely with Odo with the intention of alignment to prevent the outcome that you just described, Adam, of having two different reports. I have to have two different submittals, but sorry, not two different reports, but you won't need two different accounts is the goal. And so if we've missed something, we did do an admin rule update at the city. It's near completion. We do have a red line of what that looks like on our webpage for the commercial energy reporting program for those who are impacted in Portland and in the state. And there's quite a bit of alignment that happened there to prevent that scenario. But if there's something else that needs to happen, I think that's really helpful. For this year's reporting, we don't have all the UBID numbers. So for those buildings that are covered at the city, so we'll use our building ID system. But it's really next year that I think is more relevant, because it's the calendar year 2026 can be used for both the city and the state. So work on correcting that. What that looks like in terms of process steps, I'll just suggest a side engagement similar to what the city has done for all of our colleges and hospitals, and this gets to the most previous comment too, because they do have different experiences in terms of their utilities. There's a lot of campus energy systems, for instance. There's a lot of condo arrangements that are maybe not as clean as what's currently in the state's requirement. And the city is included in that with our own buildings as well. And so I think having some conversations to play out what those scenarios look like prior to going to the reporting year for calendar year 2026 would be a really a good goal to have as an engagement that where both Odo and the City of Portland Bureau of Planning and Sustainability are involved. Then we can make those kind of course corrections before it really is more relevant, I guess. And then I wanted to share a fairly common scenario in the commercial program, but we've also identified it in our multifamily pilot that we did last summer. And it's where you have the metering of a central meter that serves multiple buildings. So that's actually a fairly common scenario within commercial, but it does happen in multifamily. So there's a building where there's one main building, it has gas service that includes several small buildings that would be beneath both the city and state thresholds, but they have to get tenant releases for their data because the smaller buildings are served by electric companies and they have less than 4 units. So they're running into a data challenge, but it's the gas metering. So that their solutions are either they have to get tenant data releases, or they have to now install a sub-meter or work with the gas company to establish individual sub-meters for each of their smaller buildings. But that scenario, I think, presents an issue for them currently, in that if you're only allowing for one building per application, they have a building that's now metered with like 6 other buildings. So are those buildings automatically not eligible if you have multiple buildings under one building, since there's only one building per application for incentive? That's not actually my question, but this just got me thinking about it when folks were talking about the meeting earlier. I think that's a question for you, Andrew, and then I have a bigger question for Blake.
I think the question for Andrew was around one application per building, one application per group of buildings, right?
Yes. So it would be if you have a group of buildings. For tier 2, it wouldn't really matter because you don't need to show your EUI or EUIT. For tier 1, since the max funding amount per application is $35,000, $50,000, it doesn't matter too much which building you're spending the money on technically. But for tier 1 buildings, grouped buildings, you would submit one application for the group, and then you can decide which how you're spending the money essentially. Does that make sense?
I must have misunderstood earlier. I thought it was one application per building, or sorry, two buildings per round you could submit applications for from one property owner. So let's say the property owner has one building that is metered in such that there's multiple buildings, and I think that's where you're saying the question maybe more accurately there, Blake, is can that group of buildings submit under, is that considered one application, or is that considered, actually, you're not even eligible because that's more than one building?
It would be considered one application. So
Okay, so group buildings can
essentially
apply.
yeah, essentially it's one application per group of buildings or per individual building.
Okay.
Sorry, two applications total,
Mhm.
but one application, if it's a group of buildings, it would be one application. And that would
Okay.
be considered one application, yeah.
Great, thank you. And then my actual question is just thinking through process for this committee, and I might have totally missed this earlier too, but it sounds like there's some engagement around condos to not include them, to cover them in the last several months. And it sounds like this committee is going to meet semi-annually. But I think it would be helpful if there's a major decision like that that impacts, for State Portland's perspective, because we do cover condos, both commercial and residential. We actually don't cover residential right now, but it could be. We do cover some residential buildings that are mostly commercial that do have condominiums. So yeah, it does impact like how we are trying to align. But I think others, might have input on whether to remove condos that are on the committee. Is it possible to, instead of having a semi-annual kind of here's what happened meeting, but to have something more similar to how the committees the two racks were originally engaged, where it's to help inform decision making? And maybe I just totally missed it.
Yeah, I think we're open to meeting whatever timeline the advisory committees would like to meet. I think we initially planned this one as semi-annual just because we've got quite a long lead ramp up to when we need to make a recommendation for tier 2 buildings, and didn't want to take up more time than needed as we kind of get there. We might meet more frequently as that deadline approaches. But to talk specifically about like the revisions that we made last year, we had a meeting in I believe it was in August with the advisory committees where we kind of talked about what some of the discussions and potential changes are, including like the condo issues, including some of the group building issues. And then we received feedback there and then took those and made a few strategic updates to the standard that was then updated in October. But I think we're definitely open to meeting on whatever frequency the advisory committees would like us to meet, without taking up more time than needed, but responding to whatever questions do come up.
Yeah, I was in that meeting in August. I must have missed that there was an engagement around whether to include condos or exclude them. I don't recall that or have notes around it. But so I think my recommendation is not necessarily to change the timeline. I think semi-annual at a minimum is great, but if there is a major change that happens, such as that requirement, there were some other major changes that happened too. They're probably more relevant to tier 1, to engage the committees in those changes. Because they're major changes, maybe we didn't realize that in August, like that we talked for a minute and that was it, or maybe I might have just totally spaced it too. But that's my recommendation, is just to re-engage the committee more on an ad hoc level when there is a major program change.
Yeah, understood. Thanks, Finn. Thanks.
Blake, we did have a question in the chat from Jillian regarding offering compliance solutions. I think unless you have more to add, I would just refer her to the energy professionals guidance document in terms of the relevant certifications.
Right. Yeah. So I think as far as our training, she's asking about trainings that we offer. Yeah, we've got the guidance documents that are out there. We do, I think I mentioned before that one of our, we do have a plan for recording informational training sessions this year, probably about one every month moving forward. I don't know exactly when those will start, but soon. For things like how to use the energy target calculator, how to what type of buildings could be exempt, and what you need to document for that. So keep an eye out for that. But in terms of other like training sources that are out there now, I think everything that we've developed is up on the website. If there's a specific need for more training on a specific topic, let us know, and we're happy to consider how to best meet that need.
Got about 5 minutes left. If there are any other questions.
Can you address the question that Rachel put into the chat and my follow-up questions I'm curious about too?
Regarding the multifamily.
Yeah, it's the new definition. It used to say sleeping and now it's dwelling unit and buildings where residents pay rent as condos were removed.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that is our experience in Portland too. And then I have a question for Rachel that are there buildings where because often for affordable housing, there are folks who are on a lottery and they never actually apply and to become tenants that pay rent. They're given housing, and I think that those buildings, by this definition, are no longer covered, which is quite a few buildings that are in Portland at least. And then my question for you, Rachel, is are there also buildings within the Central City Concern portfolio or others that you know of in Oregon that have a mix of both uh, uh, affordable housing where the folks do pay rent and don't pay rent?
I just took myself off mute. I yes, I think that is true. There's at least in CCC's portfolio, and I couldn't tell you off the top of my head exactly like the range, but certainly we do have some buildings where we have a mix of folks that do pay rent depending on the programming and the funding and subsidies that are in place. You might have like some units where residents are paying rent and some where residents are not. We may have entire buildings where residents are not paying any rent at all, depending on the subsidies we have available to those. So that was where my question was coming to for Odo. I don't know if that was intentional, that technically by the definition provided for multifamily housing, regulated affordable housing where folks are low enough income where they're not paying rent directly, those units technically wouldn't be, or that square footage of units relative to rent paying versus non-rent paying could be exempted from the definition of multifamily housing. I doubt that was the intention, but I'm curious to know if that was intentional as a way to kind of lighten the load for regulated affordable housing.
I don't think that was the intent. I know we had some discussions around that terminology that went into the definition. I think Lisa's on, or she was on, if she had any recollection for how that discussion went in that language. Not to put her on the spot, and it's okay if you don't. We might have to get back to you on that.
I'm here, but I kind of been spacing out and missed the whole question. So sorry.
The question was around in the multifamily definition around buildings where residents pay rent.
Yeah.
Our most recent update for multifamily buildings and that clarification that was added.
Yeah, that was the clarification that was added. I'm not quite sure what the question is.
I think like we were trying to differentiate between, condos and multifamily housing. But yeah, I don't think the intent was to exempt multifamily affordable housing. So we'll have to circle back.
It was not. That was not the intent.
So
I think we were going to say pay rent, and then I think we changed the wording to something else because that might have been you who made that point that if they don't pay rent, so it's some other kind of a thing. I forget exactly the wording, but we did hear that comment about that paying rent provision. Who remembers what we put in there? But it's something.
The slide that was shown earlier said the words residents must pay rent. That's what I remember seeing on the
Well,
slide,
that might
unless
be
it's
an
not the
old
most
slide.
up-to-date version.
Yeah, that might be an old slide that didn't get the correct update. I'd have to look back in the standard again and remember what it was. It was very clever.
Right, because I know we did have some discussion about how to word it to address that scenario, to make sure that we didn't roll in those unintended consequences. So, yeah.
Pretty sure we handled that though. Thanks so much though, Rachel. I'll check and make sure.
Can you
clarify? Thanks for checking.
Oh, well, sorry, I'm clearly not tracking at all today. I have work going on in my house. I'm sorry.
And so can you all clarify that? I didn't understand where the conclusion was, because this question has come up to the city, and of course we're going to refer them to you, but it's really helpful for us to understand because we do get many questions at the city of Portland right now. And so if a building has 100 units, all 100 units have occupants who are dwelling there, and they none of them pay rent, the building is still covered? That's question one. Then if not, if there is, I think as this definition that was shared, if there is one unit that pays rent, then the whole building is covered. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, no, okay, I just looked it up and let me just read here. We have the definition of multi-family housing. It's under the tables for the definitions so it's number 61, lodging, residential, multifamily housing. And the definition says that multifamily housing refers to a covered multifamily building containing 5 or more dwelling or sleeping units where occupants are primarily permanent in nature and do not own the units.
Okay,
so we stepped away from the rental payment language. Isn't that clever? I didn't come up with that. So yeah.
Nice work. Whoever did it.
Thanks for that, Lisa.
That clarifies everything. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm sorry that our slide before didn't have the right language. Sorry.
No worries.
Did I see Michael with the hand raised?
Oh, I was just,
yeah,
following up with Vin's comment earlier and kind of circling around with Rachel's comment here is, should we have another meeting to kind of dive back into this whole condo multifamily situation?
I think we're happy to host. Yeah, if that's the way that the advisory committee wants to go. I think we'd probably look to the committee to help us come up with some like agenda items and things that we wanted to discuss specifically. But yeah, I think we're happy to. You maybe kind of get a general, for the folks that are still on, like a general hand raise from the committee if they think that's worth it. Seen a couple, so I think we're happy to do it. I guess only a couple there, but I know some folks might have had to jump at 2 o'clock. So
yeah, I think it'd be maybe helpful to if the city brought in like 10 different condo scenarios to consider, and just so we're clear, like yes, none of those would be covered, and that's the intention, because it's especially for commercial, it is not the condo scenarios are not clean cut.
Right. Yeah. So maybe then we can work on some like real life scenarios to kind of go through ahead of time and kind of walk those through with the committee to help understand. I think that would be really helpful, because I think so far today we've been talking a little bit conceptually about like the condo situations, but it would be helpful to look at some actual buildings and use those as examples.
Yeah, we have some iconic ones in Portland, Point Tower.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
Yeah. And with our experience up in Washington, it's kind of similar. I can share some examples.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
I just
go
to
ahead.
clarify one more thing about that multifamily condo language, and the reason we made that distinction is because most of the buildings in the Oregon BPS system that need to comply are buildings where someone is using that building to run a business, make some kind of a profit. And when we think about a condo owner, it's more of someone that lives there, owns it, and lives there. It's sort of a different distinction. Whereas, we're looking at a lot of commercial buildings, and arguably a multifamily building is commercial in nature because a building owner expects to, make money off of that building. So I think that was sort of the thinking behind those distinctions between condo and multifamily. I don't know if that helps or if I even should have said that, but there you go.
That does help. And now I'm curious, maybe I misunderstood. Is it residential condos are not covered, but commercial condos are, or non-residential condos are covered?
I think a commercial condo would fall similarly under the same category as a residential condo, or it could also be a not covered space if it's, if it's not large enough, if it's under the size threshold.
You see that language I just read is just for the multifamily definition. It doesn't really apply outside of that definition. So.
So I guess I'm confused then on commercial, but and in Portland, the commercial condo arrangements are a mix of both private entities that are for profit as well as nonprofits. Generally, the nonprofits are government and university condo arrangements.
Yeah, and those are not, that does not own the unit. Language that I just talked about is in the multifamily definition. It really doesn't have much to do with the commercial condo situation. So,
Then, do you have buildings that have both residential and commercial condos in one source?
Yeah, we have multiple situations like that. Like Point Tower, for instance, is about half commercial ownership with a single owner. And then the top half of it is residential condos. And then the Fox Tower, I believe it's Fox Tower, or maybe it's the building just south of there or north of there. I'm forgetting the name of that one. The newish building is a very similar arrangement but it's not uncommon for residential towers that are condos to have 1 to 12 stories that are actually commercial as well. So they'd be like offices.
Yeah, we have some instances up here where the commercial space is a condo space as well, where it's multiple owners in the same tower with residential. So I was just curious.
Yeah, that'd be something I would share. And then there are scenarios where, like if you're familiar with the Nines Hotel, that building is actually split in ownership, and it's very divided. I don't even know if they have a condo arrangement for coordinating around regulation, but they are pretty adamant about reporting to the city as 2 separate buildings, one stacked on top of each other. But I think technically that they would be considered a condo arrangement with one building, how we define things. So we try to work with them, because the point is like, however you're going to make an investment in the building, that's how we want you to report. But we've made some exceptions that we should probably try to be consistent. Yeah, so that's another. There's situations where the city of Portland is in a condo arrangement with PSU. Actually, I'm in one of those buildings right now, and it's by floor, and there's 4 different owners, but there's 7 floors. So I don't know how that breaks up, but that could be interesting to look at. But I'm guessing what I'm confused is whether or not the definition for condos for exempting them from the requirements of tier 1. Tier 2, it sounds like it's a little clearer, that especially for residential, maybe not for regular tier 2. but for tier 1 and regular tier 2, I still don't understand, are condos included or not included?
I don't know, Lisa, do you have any input on that, on where we landed with the
Well, I
commercial
think
condos?
we decided on a commercial condo. First of all, we expect them mostly to be larger. So if a building, it does have an ownership structure, if it's like a commercial office building or something, we're not talking about multifamily here, but if it's a commercial office building or whatever, it may be broken up into individual owners. I guess that's become a lot more common lately with the price of real estate. And we would look at each individual ownership portion and look at the square footage of that, so that building sort of gets broken up. I think that's how we're handling it. So it might take a large building and break it up enough that it becomes like a whole bunch of smaller, quote unquote, buildings, entities that might fall under the radar. So
Similar to Washington.
yeah. And, it's hard because I don't know, do we want to make sure we collect all those buildings or not? I kind of figure like this first round of the program, we've got enough things to work out, and we're just going to have to come back to some of these more sticky situations. It's not like we're trying to let people off the hook. And it's also not like anybody went into a condo arrangement in a commercial building to try and get out of, or the building performance standard program either, because this program didn't even exist. So I don't know. I mean, there's no right or wrong answer here. I saw Kathleen's comment too about how it had to do with complications with multiple owners having responsibilities. And yes, that's definitely a consideration, because we did talk to the people from Washington State, and especially on the multifamily side where you'll have a whole lot more building owners, it's really tough to get a whole bunch of building owners to work together and give us their information. And so that's one of the reasons we wanted to sort of sidestep it during the first rollout of this program. Commercial condo owners, we're sort of allowing them to sidestep if they're still, if each individual condo is below 20,000 square feet, I guess they're out. But those are the kinds of things that we really definitely want to talk about here for the next round of this program that takes over in 5 years. So what do we do?
Yeah. And for the city of Seattle, I think they're going to be kind of faced with that question here shortly, with the because they're looking at buildings as a whole, and like what Vin was saying, that we have some buildings up here where you have a hotel in the middle of a tower, you have a grocery store down below, et cetera. It's multifamily condos and apartments all in one tower.
Right. Yeah, there's so many more mixed use buildings these days, and they're complicated, and we tried to do our best. We reworked all of our definitions to try and address that as best as possible, but still there's these confounding situations. We had like a church that came to us, and were they tier 1 or tier 2? And we would have thought tier 1, but they had just enough child care services to drop them into being tier 2. Like they had a little school, preschool. So it's just
the nuances.
Yeah, it broke a couple of our brains when we were looking at it, but it's just the way it's going to be. Buildings are complicated. We all know that. We all have worked on buildings for years, and yeah. So we'll just keep doing our best.
Yeah, and certainly, the city, as mentioned earlier, the city and the state have been coordinating regularly, and we'll be sure to revisit, how the differences the city and the state play out in the condo scenarios as well.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ben. Okay, I know we're like 15 minutes over our original time. It's been all really good discussion and good questions, and appreciate all the input so far from the advisory committee, and looking forward to future discussions. I think at this time we'll probably need to just call this meeting, but please follow up with any other questions if you do have something that you didn't get to ask during the meeting that you want some input on. Ben, I think, and Michael, maybe I'll follow up. We'll follow up with you all to maybe look at a few specific scenarios that we can specifically on like the multifamily and condo side to bring back to this group to help illustrate how the standard applies to those buildings to help out there. I think that was our one piece of kind of to-do list after this. Any other closing comments from the committee before?
Well, just one
Yeah.
last thing from Jillian there in terms of the vendors for building owners. You can go to our website. There's a Form Q to fill out to get on our list of. They're not recommended. They've just been verified as having the correct certifications. Form Q on our website.
Yeah. Thanks, Ken. And Rachel, I do see your comment, and thank you so much for putting in your list of barriers along the way during the meeting. Those are things that we were taking notes on, and we'll log those, and those will definitely be included as we progress along our evaluation for this potential standard for Tier 2 buildings along the way. And maybe we'll do a dive into some of those barriers in future meetings.
Yeah, we've got some homework.
Yep. All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah. Have a good day.